Star Wars: A New Hope is a Star Wars movie. We are going to be reviewing, not we. I'm going to be reviewing one of the Star Wars movies every single week and lead up to the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, because we haven't had a new Star Wars movie in a while. So time to pull out all these and this. We're going to talk about all these look at these. Good. Can I put this in here now? We're going to talk about all these Star Wars movies. All the Star Wars movies. And then I'm going to review all the Mandalorian seasons as well. So, it's going to be a big Star Wars stuff for a while. And of course, if you're following my channel, I'm also reviewing... I'm reviewing the Clone Wars. I did a review for most of the seasons up to this point. Not most of the seasons. By the time this video comes out, I think I will just review season 3 or 4, whatever. Point is, I'm currently reviewing all the seasons of that, and when I move on from Clone Wars, I'll do Bad Batch, then we'll do Rebels. So if you like Star Wars, stay subscribed. And if you've been a long-time viewer of my different channels, yes, I've talked about these movies and shows many times throughout that channel, my different channels, but I've never really done them correctly and given them justice. My old Star Wars reviews were at a time where I was just doing things so differently. I would never do them the way I did now back then. And so we're going to talk about them. But yeah, just to subscribe to my channel if you like Star Wars, because we're going to be talking about Star Wars for the next several months, and obviously into the near future, because there's always Star Wars content coming out. I will be reviewing the new Darth Maul show when it comes out. I'm currently reading comics and all kinds of Star Wars stuff, so just subscribe. I will say, you probably get a guess, since I'm starting with A New Hope, I'm doing these not chronologically. I'm doing these in order of release. And the reason I'm doing that is because while, yes, technically 1, 2, and 3 are the order that they go in the saga, and then you do solo other ones like that, I don't want to talk about them like that, because there are a lot of people who are trying to figure out how to get into Star Wars. I get this from people I know. They're like, you like Star Wars. I just don't know how to get into Star Wars. There's so much of it. Or they'll tell me stories about how they had a partner or a friend who's like, I love Star Wars. Let me get you into Star Wars. Let's watch 1 through 3 and the rest. That is the worst way to watch Star Wars, because as much as I have a lot of things to say positively about Revenge of the Sith and Phantom Menace, don't really have anything to say nice about Attack of the Clones, from memory anyways. Maybe I'll change on rewatch, but I really don't have a lot nice to say about that movie from memory. You should not show a Star Wars fan those movies in that way. It is like those Lord of the Rings fans who say, alright, shut the fuck up. You haven't seen Lord of the Rings. I'm going to show you all the extended version. No, you don't do that to someone. You watch the theatrical versions with them, get them introduced to it. If they like it, the next time you watch it together, you can watch the extended versions. That is the way to do things. I think fans are so itching to get someone they like or feel like they have a connection with into the thing that they love, that they forget that they need to be slow about it and introduce them slowly. Because I had a lot of coworkers tell me about One Piece and talk about how cool it was, and that made me just want to watch it. And they were pressuring me to do it, but they were pressuring me in the right ways. They weren't like, watch everything right now, go watch 18 episodes. No, they're just like, go check out the show, it's cool. So I checked out the show, now I'm watching the show. So, now we'll actually talk about the movie. So, I guess the important thing that I don't do a lot with older movie reviews, and I really need to fix this. The reason I don't do this a lot with older movie reviews is the history of the time of when the movie was made. And I think that's just because I don't live in that time. And so it's really hard for me to throw myself back in the time of older movies. But there's some movies I tend to have more knowledge about than others, so maybe I'm able to do that a little bit better. Star Wars came out in 1977. It was called Star Wars. It wasn't called New Hope, but I'm going to call it New Hope because that's how I've always known it. And uh, and it was a big deal because this movie was so big that no one expected it to be a hit, and so toy stores were literally selling used empty boxes of Star Wars toys and promising to mail out the toys later because they couldn't meet the demands for the holiday season. Star Wars was a massive thing in the 70s when it came out because this is one of the first real blockbusters. Jaws was like considered the first because Jaws, if you don't know, the point of why Jaws is considered the first was because it was the first time a movie had not done like, hey, let's release it in the major cities early and then release it everywhere else later. No, Jaws was released at the same time for everybody else to see. And so that kind of was the beginning of what movies would become. Well, Star Wars was the first one really of what we know as the summer blockbuster. Like the movie that you eat popcorn to and you just get excited and the thrills. And it was because George Lucas was taking the things that he loved as a kid and really throwing them in here, and Akira Kurosawa movies, Flash Gordon, all these things that he inspired him. You can even see some comic books in there and things like that. And so George Lucas loved these things, and so he's like, let me make that. And the thing about this movie is really rewatching New Hope, I always forget how much of an indie movie this is, where you can feel the cheapness of it, but it also doesn't feel cheap because George Lucas really did build out a world in this movie where even C-3PO just looks a little more busted up than and not super clean. Some of the costumes are a little goofy, and some of the actors are like not the greatest at acting because George Lucas' dialogue is not the greatest. Carrie Fisher has some line deliveries in this movie that are going back and are a little goofy, but it kind of adds to the charm because you really see an indie filmmaker that George Lucas was at the time. He was not George Lucas making his indie project and doing it the way he wants to do. And so there's a lot of flaws within it that people don't really talk about. And because I think the flaws are part of its charm and what makes this movie this movie. And it's really weird watching it now and kind of thinking about that because it's really hard for anybody watching this movie put them in that mindset of this is an indie filmmaker movie. Because this was like, yes, Fox was distributing the movie in the same way there's smaller movies distributed by larger studios. And it just really was so bizarre. But it all kind of worked together. John Williams' score, of course, this movie is great. Though this is not his best score of the original trilogy. I think, Empire, we'll talk about Empire, but the scores here are really good. And just, there's a lot of smart casting decisions of people that, weren't really big names. I mean, Harrison Ford, I think before this did American Graffiti come out like a year before too? Can't remember, but he was like cameoing that and stuff. But he was perfect for this role, even though he didn't get it. Mark Hamill was legendary as this character, Luke Skywalker, Alan McGinnis. Like, a lot of these actors actually hated doing this movie, but when they see the pop culture phenomenon it grew to be, they really grew to understand it and love it. And it's kind of this weird full circle thing, and it's really interesting. Also, what's weird watching this movie now is there's so many lines that are ingrained into my head, not just because I watched this movie so many times and I just love Star Wars, but also and I've watched so many parodies of Star Wars as well, but because they don't even feel like lines in the movie. They feel like legend. Like, when Obi-Wan says, Mos Eisley Spaceport, you will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. Like, that is like, I've listened to that Star Wars parody song, Star Wars Cantina, and that song to me is so ingrained in my brain it's just fried there. So, like, when I hear that, it throws me off so much. It's just a weird phenomenon. Uh, you know, I guess some of my favorite moments in the movie, since I do want to get personal with these reviews because Star Wars means a lot to me. I really like, you know, everybody always loves the part where Princess Leia is like, "Aren't you a little short to be a stormtrooper?" This is a great bit. I love how funny it is when Han Solo starts asking the guy, "Everything's fine here." He's like, "How are you?" And then starts blasting the control. That shit was great. Han Solo is just great in this movie. And you know, I just love a lot of that. I mean, who doesn't love the not two towers, the two suns stuff? The music in that scene is just so powerful. It's just a great way of expressing the desire of that character. So there's so many like just amazing things about this movie. I mean, I could go on. I could go on talking about this movie for 20 minutes, but I feel like I've said enough because, but also not enough because I've said what I need to say, but I feel like there's so much more to say. Um, of course, the costumes and the creature designs. I mean, they're just amazing. I mean, like I said, one of the amazing things about this movie is this is a low budget indie filmmaker having to kind of work for scraps and figure this all out, and yet he builds such a lived in world that it's kind of crazy. That it's as lived in and as weird as it is. I mean, it's really a unique movie, and I love this movie. And you know, I also should say I am watching the special editions. Um, I don't have laserdisc copies or old DVDs of the non special editions. Frankly, I've always grown up with the special editions. I know the differences between the original versions, and I do believe the original cut, which I have seen, is better. But the special editions don't annoy me the way they do with some fans because at the end of the day, this is just the version I'm most familiar with. I'm really excited next year when they re-release A New Hope with the original cut of the movie, not the special editions. That would be great. But I have all these 4K Blu-rays of the special editions. We'll talk about, that. Though it says a lot to me that I think Empire is the one that has the least changes. My favorite Star Wars movie is probably still up for debate, but this is such a great movie that's crazy. I will say one of the funny things about when I first saw these movies is my dad showed me the original trilogy first because he was smart and not an idiot. Well, about Star Wars, he wasn't an idiot. My dad is a very flawed individual. We don't need to talk about that, but he showed me these movies, and he went backwards, and he said that he explained it to me. He was like, "Oh, they made 4, 5, and 6, and then they made 1, 2, and 3." And as a kid, I was like, "What the fuck? Why would they do that?" And I was just so confused as a kid. It's a very weird thing growing up with these movies. But yeah, I love Star Wars, always will, and that's just the end of it.